In the isolated highlands of eastern Oregon, concealed underneath generations of formal secrecy, rests a reality so dreadful that regional officials kept it quiet for more than 100 years. From 1852 through 1888, over 800 pioneers disappeared along a 20-mile portion of the Oregon Trail, not from illness, not from mishaps, but to something considerably more ominous. The Sacred Heart Chapel, an unpretentious wood building that pledged redemption to dying voyagers, was really the center of the most systematic mass murder operation in American boundary history. What started as separated vanishings turned into a family business so determined, so unfeelingly productive that it characterized malice itself. The Grayson family didn't just end lives for profit. They refined it into a craft, maintaining careful logs of every existence they ended, every family they obliterated, every aspiration they interred in shallow pits. Prior to diving into the shadow that consumed the Grayson family and their casualties, I have to request something of you. This channel isn't intended for everybody, just for those fearless enough to go up against the most upsetting realities concealed in America's history. If you're among the few who can endure these dim disclosures, hit subscribe and drop a remark telling me which state you're tuning in from. Your support enables us to reveal the accounts that others fear to tell. Now, we should go back to 1852 when the Oregon Trail guaranteed expectation yet conveyed ghastliness. The Oregon Trail stretched like a lifeline over the American wilderness, conveying dreams westbound through 2,000 miles of brutal wild. For the huge number of families who sold everything they claimed for an opportunity at another presence, each mile spoke to both expectation and threat. Disease, starvation, and cataclysmic events guaranteed endless lives. However, in the moving slopes of eastern Oregon, death wore an alternate face. One that grinned with Christian empathy while computing the estimation of a family's assets. The year 1852 denoted the pinnacle of Oregon Trail relocation, with more than 50,000 individuals making the hazardous excursion west. When most wagon trains achieved the Blue Mountains of Oregon, they had effectively gone almost 1,800 miles. Families were depleted. Supplies were running low and the weakest individuals were frequently yielding to trail fever, looseness of the bowels and different infirmities that transformed dreams of success into frantic battles for survival. It was in this scene of weakness that Father Moriah Grayson built up the Sacred Heart Chapel in 1851. The climate-beaten wooden structure sat roost on a slope, ignoring a characteristic resting point along the path, a spot where exhausted explorers frequently stopped to rest their bowls and cover their dead. To passing pioneers, the chapel spoke to celestial arrangement, a reference point of trust in the wild where they could look for otherworldly solace and, if necessary, legitimate Christian entombment for their friends and family. Father Moriah, a tall, gaunt man in his 40s with piercing dim eyes and a voice that directed regard, had landed in Oregon region, professing to be a voyaging evangelist. He communicated smoothly about his calling to serve the otherworldly necessities of westbound families, and his insight into sacred text appeared to be sufficiently certified to persuade even the most incredulous explorers. Next to him stood his committed spouse, who took the name Sister Constance, a lady whose delicate way and clear therapeutic learning made her significant to families battling with wiped-out kids and perishing family members. Brother Ezekiel, Moriah's more youthful kin, finished the trio that would become synonymous with both salvation and perdition. Where Moriah had the ordering nearness of a characteristic pioneer, Ezekiel was the pragmatic one, talented with his hands, learned about domesticated animals, and dependably prepared to enable battling families to repair their wagons or tend to their creatures. Together, the three made a picture of Christian philanthropy that drew frantic families like moths to a fire. The house of prayer itself was unassuming yet very much kept up, worked from nearby timber with a little cemetery neighboring the primary building. Inside, harsh pine seats confronted a basic raised area decorated with a wooden cross that Moriah professed to have cut himself. The building's most unmistakable component was its strangely huge storm cellar, which the Graysons clarified as fundamental stockpiling for supplies they kept available to help ruined explorers. The encompassing group was scant, a couple of dispersed cabins and a little exchanging post around 15 miles toward the east. This segregation served the Graysons well, as it implied less observers to their exercises and less possibility of outside obstruction. Neighborhood pilgrims who had experienced the family by and large talked well of them, adulating their liberality and Christian commitment. All things considered, who else would commit their lives to serving perishing outsiders in the center of no place? What made the Graysons especially powerful was their comprehension of the path's brutal real factors. They realized that when families achieved their area, many would be managing genuine ailment, lessening supplies, and the mental weariness that originated from long periods of hardship. They situated themselves as the response to these issues. Not simply profound guides, yet pragmatic assistants who could give therapeutic consideration, supplies, and even transitory sanctuary for families too feeble to even consider continuing quickly. The group of believers addressed never appeared to make a difference a lot to frantic families. Whether they were Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, or some other Protestant confidence, the Graysons adjusted their methodology appropriately. Morai was knowledgeable in different Protestant conventions and could cite sacred text in whatever style best comforted his group of spectators. This adaptability was pivotal on the wilderness where doctrinal contrasts frequently assumed a lower priority depending on simple survival. The initially recorded vanishing happened on September 23, 1852. However, specialists would not piece together the course of events until decades later. The Morrison family, James, his pregnant spouse Elizabeth, their 3 small kids, and Elizabeth's elderly dad had been going with a wagon train that had scattered in the wake of achieving the Oregon region. Like numerous families, they chose to push on alone toward their last goal, certain they could cover the remaining miles without the security of a bigger gathering. When the Morrisons' wagon built up a broken pivot only 2 miles from the Sacred Heart Chapel, it appeared to be celestial intercession. James Morrison would later be cited in regional records as saying the house of prayer showed up like a blessing from the Almighty when he spotted it from the edge where his wagon had separated. Brother Ezekiel, who appeared to have an uncanny capacity to show up exactly when explorers required help most, landed at the broken wagon inside hours of the mishap. Brother, Ezekiel said in the moderate, deliberate rhythm that would turn into his trademark. The Lord has put you close to our unassuming house of prayer for an explanation. Sister Constance has conceived numerous infants, and your Elizabeth looks prepared to convey at any point now. Father Morai would think of it as a respect to give sanctuary while you repair your wagon and get ready for the favored landing. The Morrison family appreciatively acknowledged the welcome, moving into the little lodge contiguous the house of prayer that the Graysons kept up for precisely such purposes. For 3 days, everything appeared to be entirely ordinary. Sister Constance tended to Elizabeth with delicate consideration. Brother Ezekiel helped James take a shot at the wagon repairs, and Father Morai gave otherworldly solace to the on-edge family. The kids played in the chapel yard, while Elizabeth's dad, Samuel, rested his arthritic bones in the lodge's agreeable rocker. On the 4th day, things started to change. Elizabeth's dad was the first to become ill, grumbling of extreme stomach issues and queasiness. Sister Constance credited it to trail affliction, a comprehensive term for the different sicknesses that tormented explorers, and started regulating what she called favored cures that she arranged from herbs and different fixings kept in the House of Prayer's storm cellar. The Lord gives recuperating through nature's abundance, she would state while blending her mixtures. Yet, some of the time the body must cleanse itself of poisons before the mending can start. Inside hours of taking Sister Constance's medication, Samuel's condition declined significantly. His skin took on a pale tone. His breathing wound up workable, and he started encountering vicious scenes of spewing and loose bowels. James Morrison, developing alarmed, inquired as to whether they should look for help from the exchanging post toward the east. However, Father Morai encouraged tolerance. Brother James, the minister stated, putting a consoling hand on the more youthful man's shoulder. I have seen this disorder commonly on the trail. It must pursue its course. Moving Samuel now would unquestionably slaughter him. We should believe in the Lord's planning and Sister Constance's mending endowments. By the 6th day, little Tommy Morrison, age 7, started indicating comparative side effects, at that point his sister Mary, age 5. Sister Constance worked perseveringly, planning more cures, regulating what she called purging medications, and keeping wake over the progressively wiped-out relatives. To James and Elizabeth, still sound yet depleted from thinking about their friends and family, the lady appeared to be a holy person sent by God to support them through their trial. The truth was far more threatening. The favored cures that Sister Constance regulated with such clear commitment contained painstakingly estimated dosages of arsenic which the Graysons had found could be gotten from neighborhood mining tasks under the pretense of bug control. The side effects, the stomach issues, sickness, skin staining, an inevitable organ disappointment, flawlessly emulate those of different trail sicknesses, making the killings essentially imperceptible to lamenting relatives who had just observed such a great amount of passing and enduring amid their excursion west. Samuel Morrison passed on the 7th day, trailed by Tommy on the 9th and Mary on the 11th. Every demise was joined by intricate Christian customs performed by Father Morai, who talked convincingly about the expired joining their heavenly dad and discovering peace in the wake of their natural enduring. The surviving relatives, smashed by despondency, yet thankful for the Graysons' otherworldly help, never addressed the quick progression of passings. All things considered, whole families had been known to capitulate to ailment out and about. What they didn't have the foggiest idea was that every night after the lamenting survivors had depleted themselves with sobbing and supplication, Brother Ezekiel would deliberately scan through the family's assets, making nitty-gritty inventories of everything of significant worth. The Morrisons had been generally prosperous back in Missouri, and their wagon contained fine furnishings, quality devices, family treasures, and a significant measure of gold coins that James had sewn into stowed-away pockets of his dress. On the 12th day, James Morrison himself started encountering the evident side effects. Elizabeth, now in the beginning periods of work, and alarmed that she would lose her better half and her youngsters and father, asked Sister Constance to do everything conceivable to spare him. The lady's reaction would later be associated with specifically chilling by the individuals who at last revealed reality. "My dear youngster," Sister Constance stated, holding Elizabeth's trembling hands. "A few sicknesses are God's method for calling his youngsters home. We should not address his insight. Just trust in his leniency. Your significant other will join your valuable children in paradise, and you will raise your new tyke, realizing that your family anticipates you in brilliance." James Morrison kicked the bucket on the 14th day, only hours before Elizabeth brought forth a child who would live sufficiently just to be purified through water by Father Morai. When Elizabeth herself capitulated to the same puzzling ailment 3 days after the fact, the whole Morrison family had been wiped out in under 3 weeks. To any outside onlooker who may have asked about the family's destiny, the Graysons had a consummately sensible clarification. The Morrisons had shown up wiped out and depleted from the trail, had contracted an intense type of looseness of the bowels that at times struck whole families, and had passed on regardless of the best endeavors of Christian parental figures who had gambled their own lives to give solace in their last hours. Father Morai had given them legitimate Christian internment in the chapel cemetery, and their assets had been sanctified to the Lord's work, a code for robbery that sounded properly devout. In any case, the Morrison family's vanishing was just the start. The Graysons had found something that would change their lives and dread the Oregon Trail for the following 36 years. Murder, when executed with adequate arranging and religious avocation, could be remarkably beneficial. The accomplishment of their first family destruction educated the Graysons significant lessons that would shape their system for quite a long time to come. They discovered that confined families were less demanding targets than those going in gatherings, that the continuous beginning of arsenic harming impeccably impersonated normal trail infirmities, and that their religious specialist gave them about boundless believability with frantic lamenting individuals who required somebody to fault other than God for their enduring. Most importantly, they found that the Oregon Trail furnished them with a boundless supply of casualties who wouldn't be missed for a considerable length of time, if at any time. Not at all like settled groups where vanishings would be immediately seen and explored, the trail was loaded with transitory families whose correct whereabouts were obscure to relatives back east. A family that vanished in Oregon probably won't be relied upon to get in touch with friends and family for a half-year or more. And after that, the risks of outskirts life gave endless conceivable clarifications to their quietness. The months following the Morrison murders saw the Graysons refining their operation. With methodical accuracy, they built up examples and methods that would serve them well throughout the years. Brother Ezekiel turned into their scout, riding the trail approaches to distinguish encouraging targets, families with conspicuous riches, those going alone or in little gatherings, and particularly those as of now managing sickness or mechanical issues that made them powerless against offers of assistance. Sister Constance built up her harming methods, trying different things with various measurements and conveyance strategies to accomplish most extreme adequacy while keeping up conceivable deniability. She found that arsenic could be effectively masked in homegrown teas, therapeutic colors, and even fellowship wine, making it basic to manage to whole families under the appearance of profound or therapeutic consideration. Father Morai, in the meantime, consummated the mental control that kept casualties consistent even as their friends and family passed on around them. He wound up noticeably master at perusing individuals' denominational foundations and altering his religious approach appropriately. For Methodist families, he underlined heavenly mending and the energy of supplication. For Presbyterians, he concentrated on predetermination and God's definitive arrangement. For Baptists, he stressed individual salvation and the guarantee of glorious get-together. The chapel itself experienced unpretentious adjustments to help their murderous undertaking. The storm cellar was extended and isolated into segments. One region for putting away casualties' assets, another for getting ready arsenic arrangements, and a third that filled in as a transitory emergency clinic where bodies could be kept while the Graysons chose on transfer strategies. They likewise burrowed a progression of unmarked graves in a forest of trees behind the sanctuary, areas that would in the long run hold the remaining parts of several of their casualties. The winter of 1852 to 1853 furnished the Graysons with significant time to design and plan for the following year's executing season. They utilized the months when the trail was generally unfilled to sort through the Morrison family's assets, choosing what to keep, what to offer, and what to stow away. They additionally made their first contact with underground market merchants in bigger Oregon settlements, building up associations with men who asked no inquiries about the starting points of the products they bought. Brother Ezekiel demonstrated especially adept at this part of their operation. His legitimate face and clear way made him conceivable when he professed to be offering assets for the benefit of families who had chosen to return east or had passed on of common causes. He figured out how to space out his deals over various groups and to target various sorts of purchasers for various classifications of merchandise. Fine furniture and family unit things went to well-off pilgrims hoping to enhance their homes. Devices and cultivating gear were offered to handy agriculturists. Gems and valuable metals advanced their approach to vendors who represented considerable authority in such things. By spring 1853, the Graysons had changed from beginner executioners into expert predators with a refined comprehension of their art. They had settled the common-sense issues of casualty choice, murder philosophy, body transfer, and benefit acknowledgement. All the more essentially, they had made an open persona that made them basically above doubt. The spring of 1853 carried restored trail activity and new chances to the Grayson family undertaking. Their second significant achievement came in May when they experienced the Hoffman family, German foreigners who talked constrained English and were going with a wagon brimming with important assets, incorporating fine craftsmanship devices, quality materials, and a significant measure of gold coins that spoke to their investment funds. The Hoffmans were perfect casualties from numerous points of view. Their dialect hindrance made them subject to the Graysons for correspondence with different explorers. Their outside traditions made them appear to be intriguing and possibly dubious to other trail clients, and their undeniable riches made them appealing targets. Also, their constrained English implied they were more averse to get unpretentious alerts or to successfully convey worries to different explorers. The family's patriarch, Heinrich Hoffman, was an accomplished Czech creator who had brought his instruments and exchange products to build up a business in Oregon. His significant other, Greta, was pregnant with their fourth youngster and their three existing kids went in age from 6 to 12. When mechanical issues with their wagon constrained them to look for help close to the Sacred Heart Chapel, the Graysons saw another chance to consummate their lethal art. This time they tried different things with various methodologies. Rather than sitting tight for the family to create normal ailment, Sister Constance started regulating little dosages of arsenic nearly instantly, masked as preventive drug to avert trail maladies. She persuaded the family that the favored assurance she offered would keep them sound amid their recuperation period. Mein Gott, Heinrich said in his broken English when Sister Constance initially offered his medication. You are so benevolent to outsiders. God will favor you for helping us. God has just favored us, Sister Constance answered with polished genuineness, by giving us the chance to serve his kids in their period of scarcity. The Hoffman family's murder took about a month to finish, however the expanded course of events enabled the Graysons to altogether stock their assets and set up nitty-gritty arrangements for discarding the significant clock production devices and exchange merchandise. It likewise offered them time to concentrate the family schedules and connections, learning that would demonstrate important in their future operations. Before the finish of 1853, The Graysons had effectively killed 3 total families totaling 16 individuals, and they had started to see their operation as a business that required the same cautious arranging and regard for detail as some other beneficial undertaking. They began keeping records, not simply of their casualties' assets, but rather of their strategies, their errors, and their triumphs. These records, found decades after the fact in the sanctuary's concealed storm cellar compartments, would in the long run give examiners a horrifying window into the efficient way of the Grayson family's violations. Written in Father Morai's exact penmanship, the records contained point-by-point passages for every family they killed, including names, dates, belonging taken, transfer strategies utilized, and benefits acknowledged from offering stolen products. The passages were written in a cool business-like style that regarded human lives as stock things. An average section may peruse: Morrison family, 5 spirits withdrew, September-October 1852. Belongings incorporated 2 gold coins, furniture things, quality apparatuses. Collections interred in Forest Segment C, assessed benefit 400 tons. Strategy: arsenic through restorative teas. Span 17 days. Lessons learned: diminish measurement recurrence to broaden course of events and lessen doubt. As expression of the Graysons' beneficent work spread along the trail, they started pulling in casualties effectively looking for their assistance. Families who had found out about the great Christian people who helped voyagers would occasionally look for the Sacred Heart Chapel particularly, strolling straightforwardly into the trap that the Graysons had so deliberately developed. The Graysons' efficient way to deal with mass murder advanced essentially amid their second year of operation. They had gained from their initial encounters that achievement required not only powerful executing systems, but in addition refined frameworks for dealing with each part of their dangerous endeavor. Father Morai, with his scientific personality and authority abilities, started treating their operation like a business that happened to include murder as opposed to a progression of irregular killings. The mid-year of 1854 denoted a defining moment in their technique when they experienced the Wetherbe family from Tennessee. Charles Wetherbe was a previous Confederate officer who had chosen to look for his fortune in Oregon as opposed to revamp his war-battered estate. He went with his significant other Margaret, their twin little girls Sarah and Susan, matured 15, and Margaret's more youthful sibling David, an accomplished smith who had brought his total arrangement of expert devices. What made the Wetherbe case huge was not simply their riches. However, Charles had changed over the greater part of his remaining resources into gold coins and gems that he kept concealed in an extraordinarily developed compartment in his wagon, however their insight and normal suspicion. Charles had been a military officer, prepared to see points of interest and evaluate dangers. Margaret was an informed lady who had perused widely about trail perils and was normally careful about confiding in outsiders. At the point when the Wetherbe wagon created will issues close to the sanctuary, Charles at first opposed the Graysons' proposals of help. He had heard stories about explorers who had acknowledged assistance from outsiders and never been seen again, and something about the segregated area and the helpful planning of Brother Ezekiel's appearance made him uncomfortable. "I value your Christian foundation," Charles let Father Morai know amid their first gathering, "however we have the abilities and apparatuses to deal with our own repairs. We'll proceed onward specifically." Father Morai, be that as it may, had turned out to be master at perusing individuals and adjusting his approach as needs be. Instead of squeezing the issue, he pulled back nimbly, referencing casually that Sister Constance had said seeing indications of ailment around there, conceivably cholera or looseness of the bowels, and proposing that the family should need to consider remaining until they were sure none of them had been uncovered. "Obviously, Brother Charles," Morai said with clear comprehension, "a shrewd man secures his family, yet I would feel remiss in my Christian obligation in the event that I didn't make reference to that Sister Constance has been treating a few instances of trail fever as of late. The indications can take time to show, and going while tainted can spread the ailment and debilitate the body's resistances." The notice of malady had precisely the impact Morai expected. Margaret Wetherbe, as of now depleted from quite a long time of trail life and stressed over her little girl's well-being, started to rethink their brisk takeoff. When youthful David built up a mellow fever the following day, a fever that Sister Constance asserted was an early side effect of the territorial disorder, the family's opposition disintegrated. "Maybe," Margaret proposed to her better half, "we should acknowledge their proposal of asylum just until we're certain David isn't genuinely sick." Charles concurred hesitantly. Be that as it may, his military preparing made him keep up a level of readiness that represented a test for the Graysons. Not at all like their past casualties who had been frantic and appreciative, Charles viewed everything with ascertaining eyes and posed pointed inquiries about the family's experience and the destiny of different explorers who had looked for their offer assistance. The Graysons adjusted by giving him painstakingly created stories about their effective treatment of past families. They demonstrated to him the House of Prayer cemetery, indicating graves that they asserted had a place with explorers who had landed effectively kicking the bucket and had gotten appropriate Christian entombment. They even acquainted him with tributes, letters, manufactured records, purportedly composed by appreciative families who had recouped from genuine sicknesses and proceeded securely to their goals. "Brother Charles," Father Morai said one night as they sat on the sanctuary yard, "I comprehend your alert. A man who has served his nation figures out how to confide painstakingly. In any case, consider this, on the off chance that we implied you hurt, would we not have acted at this point? Would we not pick simpler focuses than an prepared officer with weapons and cautious eyes?" The mental control was unpretentious yet successful. By recognizing Charles's doubts and military foundation, Morai made him feel regarded and insightful. By calling attention to that he would be a troublesome focus, the minister made the possibility of being focused on appear to be less likely. In particular, by showing clear openness and genuineness, he continuously brought down Charles's protections. The real killings of the Weathered family took about a month and a half to finish, speaking to the longest course of events the Graysons had yet endeavored. Sister Constance started with very little dosages of arsenic managed through water that she asserted had been favored for mending and prescribed for keeping the spread of sickness. The measurements were so little that the indications created gradually, showing up to be common sickness instead of harming. David, the most youthful and genuinely most fragile individual from the family, surrendered first. His passing appeared to affirm Sister Constance's admonitions about the territorial ailment, and the family's appreciation for her consideration amid his last days made them significantly more confiding in her restorative learning. Margaret was next, creating indications that Sister Constance ascribed to the strain of nursing David through his sickness. Charles, prepared to dissect front-line circumstances, started to see designs that exasperated him, the way that he and his little girls stayed sound while the others became ill, the unconventional idea of the indications, and the Graysons' steady vicinity amid the most noticeably bad snapshots of every relative's disease, all added to a developing feeling of anxiety. His doubts achieved an emergency point when he found Brother Ezekiel looking at the items in his wagon late around evening time. When gone up against, Ezekiel asserted he had been checking to guarantee that their assets were secure and that wild creatures hadn't gotten into their supplies. The clarification was conceivable, yet Charles's impulses said something else. "Margaret," he said to his withering spouse the following morning, "I think we have to leave this spot. Something isn't right here." Be that as it may, Margaret was excessively powerless, making it impossible to go, and moving her would probably have executed her. Charles ended up caught between his developing doubts and his adoration for his family. He couldn't surrender his withering spouse, yet he additionally couldn't shake the inclination that remaining would destruction every one of them. The determination came when Charles made a disclosure that affirmed his most noticeably bad feelings of dread. While looking for restorative supplies in the sanctuary storm cellar, he stumbled upon a concealed compartment containing assets that clearly have a place with different voyagers, things that were excessively close to home and excessively important, making it impossible to have been intentionally surrendered by their proprietors. Among the concealed assets, he discovered a youngster's doll that indicated indications of late possession, a pocket watch etched with a name he didn't perceive, and most harming of all, a letter tended to somebody in Oregon City that bore a late date yet had clearly never been sent. The letter, written in a lady's penmanship, portrayed showing up securely at a chapel and expressing gratefulness to God for the graciousness of the Christian family who was thinking about her debilitated kids. Charles understood that he had found proof of past killings and that his family was being deliberately harmed by the very individuals who guaranteed to be sparing them. However, his acknowledgement came past the point of no return. Margaret passed on that night, and he woke up the following morning feeling the natural side effects that had gone before every relative's passing. What Charles didn't have the foggiest idea was that the Graysons had been viewing him painstakingly, had seen his developing doubts, and had chosen to quicken his harming before he could follow up on his worries. Father Morai had slipped a monstrous measurements of arsenic into Charles's night feast, guaranteeing that the previous trooper would be excessively powerless, making it impossible to posture a risk. As Charles lay withering, his twin girls at his bedside, he made a frantic endeavor to caution them about the Graysons' actual nature. In any case, his words were excused as the meanderings of a fevered personality, and the young ladies kept on trusting the general population who were gradually killing them. The Weathered case showed the Graysons a few vital lessons. In the first place, that wise, dubious casualties required more complex control strategies. Second, that broadening the murder course of events, while hazardous, really made their wrongdoings more conceivable and beneficial. Third, that they required better strategies for identifying and overseeing casualties who got to be suspicious of their exercises. In particular, the case exhibited that even prepared, astute individuals could be effectively tricked and killed if the correct mental strategies were connected with adequate tolerance and expertise. This acknowledgement gave the Graysons certainty to focus on progressively rich and conspicuous families, realizing that their strategies could conquer even the most watchful and suspicious explorers. The revelation of proof from past murders in the sanctuary storm cellar likewise prompted changes in their proof transfer methodology. They started copying individual things that could distinguish casualties, liquefying down adornments and valuable metals to wipe out checking marks, and making more complex concealing spots for assets that they expected to keep or offer later. Before the finish of 1854, the Graysons had killed 23 individuals in 7 families, and their operation had turned into a complex criminal endeavor that created significant benefits while keeping up complete mystery. They had additionally started to see themselves not as lawbreakers, but rather as instruments of celestial will, who were compensated for their administration by being permitted to flourish from their casualties' assets. The year 1855 denoted an urgent defining moment in the Graysons' murderous profession when they experienced their first real test, the survival of a planned casualty who had seen enough to uncover their whole operation. The episode started normally enough with the landing of the Patterson family from Ohio. However, it would end with the Graysons confronting the alarming likelihood of revelation and the need to make urgent decisions about their future. Thomas Patterson was a fruitful shipper who had sold his Ohio business to seek after open doors in Oregon's developing economy. He went with his better half Emily, their 4 youngsters matured 8 to 16, and Emily's sister Catherine, an unmarried lady in her 30s, who filled in as the family's instructor and parental figure. What made the Patterson family especially alluring to the Graysons was not simply their undeniable riches. Thomas had changed over his business resources into effortlessly convenient gold and banknotes, yet in addition their evident regardability and the probability that their vanishing would in the long run be seen by partners in both Ohio and Oregon. The family's wagon train had scattered close to the Blue Mountains, and they were going alone when they experienced Brother Ezekiel roughly 5 miles from the Sacred Heart Chapel. Their wagon had not separated, and no relatives were clearly sick. Be that as it may, Ezekiel had figured out how to make openings as opposed to simply sitting tight for them to happen. "Great evening, brother," Ezekiel called out as he moved toward the Patterson wagon. "I couldn't resist seeing your fine group of bulls. That is quality domesticated animals right there. You folks wouldn't happen to be keen on exchanging for some new supplies, would you? We keep a decent stock at the sanctuary not far off." Thomas Patterson was a keen broker who had figured out how to assess offers painstakingly before settling on choices. He was keen on the likelihood of acquiring new supplies, yet something about Ezekiel's way, maybe excessively inviting, excessively anxious, made him cautious. "We value the offer," Thomas answered. "Be that as it may, we're very much supplied for whatever remains of our adventure. We'll proceed onward specifically." Ezekiel, be that as it may, had readied for this reaction. Obviously. In any case, I ponder whether I may make reference to something that could spare your family extensive difficulty. Sister Constance, that is our restorative lady, she's been treating a few instances of mountain fever as of late. Repulsive business that grabs hold step by step, and before individuals understand they're debilitated, they're excessively powerless, making it impossible to go securely. The notice of illness had its proposed impact on Emily Patterson, who quickly started agonizing over her kids' well-being. "Mountain fever?" she inquired. "We haven't caught wind of anything about illness around there." "All around, Mother," Ezekiel said with polished concern. "It's not something individuals like to discuss. Awful for business, in the event that you comprehend what I mean. However, Sister Constance, she has cures that can counteract it if directed before the side effects show up. May be beneficial your time to stop by the sanctuary simply to have your family inspected. Thomas stayed incredulous, yet Emily's maternal impulses had been initiated. The possibility that her youngsters may be presented to a hazardous illness without her insight was alarming, and the likelihood of counteractive action was excessively important, making it impossible to overlook. Thomas, she said discreetly, maybe we should in any event address this restorative lady. On the off chance that there's ailment around there, shouldn't we play it safe? Reluctantly, Thomas consented to visit the sanctuary, disclosing to himself that they would just get data about the assumed malady and afterward proceed with their adventure. He had no chance to get of realizing that this choice would prompt the most ghastly ordeal of his life and the close pulverization of his whole family. The Graysons got the Patterson family with their standard blend of Christian warmth and unpretentious control. Father Morai intrigued Thomas with his insight into business and his natural knowledge of business conditions in Oregon. Sister Constance beguiled Emily with her delicate way and her evident love for youngsters. Brother Ezekiel engaged the Patterson kids with accounts of Boondock's life and exhibitions of his different handy abilities. Inside hours of their landing, the family had consented to remain the night at the house of prayer to permit Sister Constance to inspect everybody for indications of mountain fever. The assessment uncovered, as anyone might expect, that a few relatives indicated early side effects that required prompt treatment with Sister Constance's preventive cures. Catherine Patterson, Emily's sister, was the first to get treatment. As an unmarried lady with no kids of her own, she had committed her life to thinking about her sister's family and was especially worried about the kids' well-being. She anxiously acknowledged Sister Constance's medication and empowered the others to do likewise. In any case, Catherine was likewise the most perceptive individual from the family, and she had a normally scientific personality that made her notice subtle elements that others may miss. On the second night of their remain, she watched Brother Ezekiel making what gave off an impression of being a cautious stock of their wagon's items. At the point when she said this to Sister Constance, the more seasoned lady excused it as routine worry for their security. Brother Ezekiel checks every one of our visitors' assets, Sister Constance clarified. We had issues with robbery previously, and we need to guarantee that nothing goes missing while families are under our consideration. The clarification appeared to be sensible, yet Catherine kept on seeing little subtle elements that troubled her, the way Father Morai's eyes waited on Thomas's gold watch, the way that Sister Constance dependably arranged her solutions in private, never enabling anybody to watch the procedure, the peculiar happenstance that each relative who got treatment appeared to create manifestations that required extra treatment. Catherine's doubts achieved a basic point on the fourth day when she found Sister Constance including a white powder to the drug expected for youthful Timothy Patterson, the family's most youthful tyke. At the point when Catherine got some information about the powder, Sister Constance asserted it was favored salt that upgraded the mending properties of the herbs. In any case, Catherine had experienced childhood in Ohio, where her dad had been a drug specialist, and she perceived the glass-like appearance of the powder as conflicting with conventional salt. All the more critically, she saw that Sister Constance got to be apprehensive and guarded when addressed about her techniques, very not the same as the quiet certainty she normally showed. That night, Catherine settled on a choice that would spare her life and the lives of her enduring relatives. Rather than taking her recommended pharmaceutical, she imagined to drink it while really spitting it into a handkerchief. She likewise figured out how to persuade youthful Timothy to do likewise, disclosing to him it was a diversion they could play together. The outcomes were sensational and alarming. While Thomas, Emily, and the three more seasoned kids kept on debilitating from their medicines, Catherine and Timothy remained sound. All the more vitally, Catherine started to see that the most wiped-out relatives were the individuals who had been most consistent with Sister Constance's therapeutic routine. By the sixth day, 2 of the Patterson kids had passed on, and Thomas was obviously kicking the bucket. Emily, however frail, was still cognizant and sufficiently cautioned to have a discussion with her sister. It was amid this discussion that Catherine settled on the choice to share her doubts. "Emily," she murmured, "I think these individuals are harming us. I think they're slaughtering our family." Emily's underlying response was shock and outrage. The possibility that the caring Christian family who had been thinking about them could be executioners appeared to be outlandish. Be that as it may, as Catherine clarified her perceptions and the example of indications, Emily started to see the ghastly truth. What might we be able to do? Emily inquired. Thomas is kicking the bucket. The kids are passing on. Furthermore, we're excessively powerless, making it impossible to go. Catherine had been planning for this inquiry. We need to escape from here, regardless of whether it executes us. Remaining here will absolutely murder us. What's more, we need to take Timothy. He's the main other one who hasn't been taking the medication. The departure design that Catherine concocted was frantic and hazardous, yet it spoke to their exclusive possibility of survival. She sat tight until the early morning hours when the Graysons were snoozing, at that point helped Emily and Timothy slip out of the lodge. Thomas was excessively powerless, making it impossible to move, and the more seasoned youngsters were oblivious. However, Catherine settled on the torturous choice to abandon them as opposed to chance the lives of the individuals who may in any case be spared. The three survivors made their approach to the family wagon where Catherine had stowed away a portion of their gold and fundamental supplies. Be that as it may, as they were getting ready to leave, they heard strides drawing nearer from the sanctuary. Father Moore.